Hey everyone, how are you? I hope you had a great start into 2019. We definitely had a very crazy week. We've been featured in a German business magazine. We gave an interview about why Alibaba is expanding to Europe, and I've been quoted with the quote that maybe Zalando might be an acquisition target for Alibaba. This video is all about the background about this. Let's jump right into it. However, before we start digging deeper into the topic, I just want to make sure that I'm not invested in Zalando at all, so I have no interest in pushing the shares. I own a little bit of Alibaba shares. However, this video is not investment advice at all. I'm just talking about my personal opinion. I'm talking about what I see here in the industry based on my experience, and that's it. Alright, so here's what's happened. By the end of the last year, we've been interviewed by a German newspaper. It's called Handelsblatt. It's a business magazine because they were going to publish a big report about Alibaba, who's exploring Europe. Basically, they're entering the markets in different ways, and they interviewed us because we're deeply connected in this industry, because we are running our own cross-border e-commerce app. It's called Dongxi, between Germany and China. So it's been several pages about how Alibaba is expanding into Europe, and one piece of it was the interview given by us or by myself. And in the article, this news magazine is quoting myself with the quote that Zalando might be a possible acquisition target for Alibaba. So what happened next was that a couple of German media outlets, they started picking on this quote. This resulted in a big spike in the Zalando shares. It rose 6% on that day. It's still rising. It's now up 20% since the interview was published. And basically it marked a little of a turnaround in Zalando shares, because as you may have seen before, Zalando shares got heavily into a downfall. They lost around 50% of their market capitalization. So I guess like investors were looking into some positive news here. And as my dear friend Fabian Leipelt from Westtech Ventures already pointed out rightly in some of the comments on my post, this is not entirely news, right? The idea that Alibaba could invest into Zalando is old. Several media have already written about it. It's just now that when Alibaba has opened their first trade hub in Belgium, this news certainly gets some traction, because we see now that the expansion plans of Alibaba are kind of getting into an operational mode. So one of the important reports that came out in 2018, which is talking about the Alibaba expansion, was by Oliver Wyman, a management consultancy, who wrote in their consumer and retail report that Alibaba and Jingdong, so JD.com, have big plans for Europe. So the report was stating that Alibaba is going to invest about 13 billion euros into Europe, into their expansion plans. And if we look at one of their infographics featured in this report, which is unfortunately in German, you can also see how relevant this is. So in this report, in this infographic, they're basically showing that Alibaba and Jingdong, the biggest Chinese retailer, if they keep continuing to grow at the growth rate of about 30% per year, they will keep up with the top 10 German retailer in total. And this means like big retailers like Aldi, Edeka, Rewe, Metro and Otto. And in this report, they're also stating that until 2025, Alibaba and Jingdong will make more than 10 billion euro of revenue in Europe, not in China, in Europe. So Aldi, Edeka, DM, whatever the name is, they really need to get aware about this, and they need to find a strategy. Same goes for Zalando. So, and if you look at the players here in Germany and Europe, you see that Zalando is one of the biggest e-commerce players in the field. It's a fashion company. I think most of you guys know it for sure, so I'm not going to go into detail. Only that they have around 5 billion in euros of revenue, around 15,000 employees and 7 locations here in Europe. So that is the big picture for Zalando. They want to keep growing and outperform the fashion market, and definitely they need some answers of how they want to achieve it. I watched this one YouTube presentation at K5, which is a local Berlin-based e-commerce conference, where one of the founders and managing directors of Zalando, Robert Gens, was answering to the what he sees in the future. And what you can already see here is that he is also very keen about the Chinese market. He's been saying so in a couple of interviews. I think he knows quite well about the Chinese market. He's quite attracted by Alibaba and what they are doing. He's definitely a person who sees all those trends, and he's also pretty keen on it. Another thing that happened in 2018 at Zalando is that they had a strategic shift because they let go some of the marketing employees, shifting more towards a analytical approach, hiring developers who are doing lots of big data and algorithm-based development for Zalando. So they're switching to become a more tech-based company. And this is also a development where I would say this goes hand in hand with what Alibaba is doing. Alibaba is quite a tech-heavy company, investing a lot in artificial intelligence, in algorithms. So I see some commonalities here. On top of it, Zalando announced that they are building a kind of a platform strategy, which means they want to shift from just being a retail company and selling things in their own name to basically providing an ecosystem on which different players, such as brands, can get some value-added services. So they want to become much more of a platform-based business. It's actually also inspired by what Alibaba is doing in China. And this is also one of the big shifts that we need to consider here. One more interesting fact that I want to point out here is that Zalando's recently also moving into beauty market. So I find it quite interesting that now they are not only selling fashion anymore, so they also sell some beauty brands. And this is highly interesting if you're talking about China because, from my personal experience, we also switched from selling basically everything, each category to only selling cosmetics because this is one of the most attractive categories in a cross-border business with China. So let's talk a little bit more about what Zalando is actually doing regarding China. So what Zalando did here is they basically went on one of Alibaba's platforms, which is called Tmall or Tianmao Guoji in Chinese. So that's basically the Alibaba platform for Western brands looking to enter the Chinese market. That's where they advertise all of the imported goods to their Chinese consumers. And as a Western brand, if you're big enough and if you have lots of resources, you can open a flagship store in your own name. It's a very complicated process, but if you get on there, it's basically the biggest market share platform. So what Zalando did here is they went not in their full name, but they opened a shop in the name of Set Labels, which is one of the private labels of Zalando. They started selling some of the shoes and fashion items of Xiaomi and so forth. And what I could see here, because that's the beauty of those Chinese platforms, is that you see the sales numbers. And I've been looking at it for quite some time, and it seemed that Zalando was pretty much struggling with getting up the sales. So they opened a shop here, and they reached around 100 items, like that's the best-selling item of 100 sales per month. So definitely this cannot be the ideal outcome for Zalando if they want to enter the market, they want to sell big. It seems like their overseas cross-border business with China never got traction. This was possibly due to a lack of brand awareness. I mean, nobody knows Set Labels in China, so you really need to push it big. And I've been actually in contact with some of the members of Zalando who is managing the stores, and they told me that they really never got a big budget to promote the stuff, so it was really hard to push it. There was no real marketing concept and obviously no marketing success. We also noticed that those Zalando goods, the quality was not really high. It's actually made in China, so it doesn't make much sense to make it in China, ship it back to Germany, and then sell it across to China again. And you want to label it as, the German fashion retailer. It doesn't make much sense. It's not a good story to sell. So in the end, this was not very successful. They also tried some stuff on WeChat because they were disappointed that on Tmall they didn't get all the insights and data which they needed to analyze their market entry. And what I heard as well is that they faced more operational problems. So the cross-border logistics and cross-border payment was not smooth at all. And basically, this way they were moving too slow. So that's about Zalando and what they have done regarding China. So you can see they definitely care about the Chinese market. They don't ignore it at all. They run a few tests. Obviously, it's possible to fail. That's not a big deal. However, it seems like they didn't succeed in kind of enter the market with their own brands and with their own products. Okay, but let's zoom out and have a little bit of a look at the broader picture here. So on the one hand side, you have the Alibaba group, who might be expanding into Europe and might become an investor. And on the other hand, you have Zalando. So if you're looking at the Alibaba ecosystem, you can see here that it's a huge ecosystem. It's not only about e-commerce, they also have some mobile media and entertainment outlets, they have local services, they have payment and logistics services, they have cloud computing. All of this is way too much to cover in this video. So for our short analysis here, it's enough if we make ourselves clear that Alibaba is much more than only e-commerce. They're also running their own cloud services. They have their own mobile payment and cross-border payment with Zhifubao, which is Alipay. They have Tmall Global, which is the cross-border e-commerce platform. And with Cainiao, they also have their own logistics infrastructure. On the other hand, if you look at Zalando, what is exciting about Zalando? Well, they're well established here in Germany or in entire Europe, with more than 25 million active consumers. So that's definitely an interesting story here for Alibaba. And they have lots of brands, fashion houses and retailer, which they connect on their platform now. In addition to that, obviously, Zalando also have their own marketing know-how and marketing services, and they invest in their own logistics. Now, if we look a little bit more about what Alibaba is doing as an investor, I think it's quite interesting to point out that Alibaba is a very, very active and very diverse investor. So if you just compare it to where Amazon is investing, you can see that Alibaba, and this list is nowhere complete, but they're making many, many more investments that Amazon is doing. Also, they make more investments close to e-commerce and social commerce, whereas Amazon is more investing into some technical infrastructure. And Alibaba also has many more services that are like completely off the radar in different kind of categories. If you look more into detail in this, you can see that still the main area of investment for Alibaba is in the area of e-commerce and logistics, so pretty close to their core business, which makes a lot of sense to them. And also, if you look like geographically, where is Alibaba investing? Well, we need to say that most of it is currently happening still in China. So Alibaba is so far investing mostly in Chinese companies or in Southeast Asian companies. And then if you look at the status quo about like Zalando on the one hand side, who might be an acquisition target, and on the other hand, Alibaba, who might be an investor, you can clearly see that Zalando has been like going downhill, losing 50% of the market cap, currently have been at a valuation of around 6 billion euros. And on the other hand, Alibaba with a very healthy free cash flow, also lots of cash, which is going down a little bit, but mainly because they've been doing some acquisitions. So if you're looking at the cash and the cash equivalents of Alibaba, you can see that with the downfall of this Zalando market capitalization, it's definitely in reach to buy. So this technically and financially would be possible, although now shares getting much more expensive again. And to be honest about it, of course, it's not a small deal. It would be a major deal if in case that they take over Zalando entirely. So let's jump a little bit more into why I think such a deal, aside of the financials, would make sense on just the business model level. So you need to understand that for Alibaba, how they're currently running their cross-border e-commerce is that they have this platform, Tmall Global, where Western brands can be onboarded. And one aspect of it is that if you want to do this, if you're a Western brand and you want to go on this platform, what you need to find a Tmall partner. And what it is basically a third party, it's an agency who helps you to get onboarded on Tmall Global in order to open your store. So now from the perspective of a Western brand, this is quite an intransparent process. If you have never dealt with China before, you first need to find the right TP. You can find it at some of the Alibaba events here in Germany. There's a broad range of different TPs. Some are only Chinese, some are also based here in Europe. But basically, there's always some kind of friction, right? It's not a very smooth process. It's also expensive. And that's the status quo of like the brands, how they're looking to get into the Chinese market. So what a deal between Alibaba and Zalando could mean in some aspects is to bring some new ideas to how this model works. So the Tmall partner model, I don't think it would be entirely erased. However, there's a huge leverage of Zalando, what they could do, basically pooling all of their brands, their retailers, the private label, and help those players in Germany with a value-added service in kind of the onboarding process, for instance, to Chinese platforms, be it Tmall Global or some of the other Alibaba platforms. I think Zalando could be a player who's doing this technical interface, controls the user experience in the Western Hemisphere. They have the negotiating power with the brands, they have the reach, and they're a trustworthy player here in Germany. So I've been seeing that some of the smaller players and startups here in Germany or the UK are also doing this kind of a tech integration. They're trying to start flagship stores, for instance, on Tmall or also on their competitor platforms and pool some of the brands. Mostly they're not successful, to be clear on that. However, I think if Zalando would do something like this would move to an entirely different scale. It makes much more sense. Also given the fact that Zalando is actually saying that they want to move away from a retail business model more towards a platform business model. So they want to offer their ecosystem more services. And if they have a brilliant service that actually helps those Western players to onboard on Chinese platforms, hopefully in an automatic way, that could be a huge deal. And it also makes it much more easier for Alibaba to grow in the Western Hemisphere. And one interesting fact here is that Zalando also has maybe a little missing piece of the puzzle because they are recently, they have invested in a startup called TradeByte. What they do is they do marketplace integration, and this could be just a player who's actually building the backend for it and integrates also into the Chinese platform. I think this can be done easily. It's just a matter of connecting the APIs, and it's already owned by Zalando. So this is just one example how the business models between Alibaba and Zalando actually are quite complementary. And I think it would be a good idea to actually bring some of those resources together, because those are the two players who are actually in a place to actually get the automation and the scale necessary to build a truly global e-commerce platform. And in this example, I only picked the one side, going from the west to China. This obviously also works the other way around. So Alibaba definitely would be interested in getting some of their Chinese vendors more exposure within Europe. So we all know that lots of Chinese companies are selling currently on Amazon. It's a big problem. Some of my friends from Textu, it's a great startup from Hamburg, are working, for instance, on the legal and the taxation issues of that. And if like Zalando and Alibaba can offer a technical solution to this, I think there's lots of positive things coming out of it. So to conclude some of the things I just mentioned, I think there are a lot of synergies on the table for both sides. For Zalando, it's obviously access to China, something that they have tried before, but they have failed. They need a new idea how they can go to China. They would get access to the latest tech in mobile payment, influencer market, and social commerce, because those topics are hot in China. The management of Zalando knows about it. Everybody knows about it who's an insider into this industry. So there's a lot to learn in China, and I think Zalando would be more than happy to work in this field. They would get more consumer insights into the world's largest growing middle class, because to be honest, where is all the growth coming from into the next years? It's definitely in Asia and in China. Also, Zalando could get access to the Alibaba know-how. So Alibaba is a leader in artificial intelligence, in robotics, in automatization, logistics, and in offline to online commerce, O2O commerce. So there's lots of things to learn, and that would certainly benefit Zalando. Also, they could grow stronger ties for China. Lots of Zalando products are made in China, so they could strengthen their sourcing. And one more big reason is that Zalando could actually switch to Alibaba Cloud, which would be a big project, but as far as I'm informed, currently Zalando is running on Amazon servers, so AWS, basically hosted on their competitor. So there would also be some synergies in this area on the technical part, and as well as finally, they got a new growth story, because China is big. They can show their investors, like the shareholders, how they want to achieve some growth in the future, and they could also differentiate from the competitors such as ASOS. So why would Alibaba invest in Zalando? Well, first big reason, of course, is 25 million active users in Europe. If Alibaba at some point wants to sell directly to European users in a bigger scale, they have to choose between building up themselves, the user base, or just to acquire somebody who actually already has the user base. The second point is they want access to the Western brands. As mentioned, Alibaba has already opened an office here in Munich, in Germany. That's because they want to attract more brands to come onto their platforms. And also they want to push their Alibaba cloud services. Our startup as well is hosted on Alibaba Cloud, so we're one of the early adapters. But of course, they don't care about small startups like we are. They want big companies and big cases that they can show that are adapting Alibaba Cloud. And as well as possibly mobile payment services like Alipay. It's currently in some retailers offline, available in Germany. It's not so much used on a mobile phone in Germany. It's not used by Germans at all, but why not in the future? It makes a lot of sense. Chinese are really good at mobile payment. It's also Chinese companies are starting to invest into the European ecosystem. You may have heard about Ping An Insurance, who's recently investing, I think, like 40 million into the German fintech incubator FinLeap, which makes a lot of sense to me. And next reason is because definitely Zalando is a great brand. It's a great company with a good management team. They have a very, very powerful brand in Europe, and that's something that Alibaba couldn't build themselves. Also, a very interesting point to consider is the Zalando employees. Well, as I pointed out before, Zalando is making a switch more to technical employees, so that's completely in line with what Alibaba is doing. I don't think they want to invest into an old school company who's not building stuff themselves. They want developers, and they want a very technical background. As outlined in this video, I think the current TP business model is a pain point both for Western companies and in some way also for Alibaba themselves, because it means a lot of work. It's not automated, and I think at some point they want to grow it bigger and faster. And if we also consider trends like artificial intelligence and more automatization, I think they're looking to make this thing all automatized in some way as far as it's possible. So if they have a player like Zalando who can be like the local partner somewhere else, that makes a lot of sense. Also, as I pointed out before, Zalando is also moving into the beauty area, which I think is a great cross-border e-commerce case. If they want to try something again in China, I would recommend they go for this kind of products. It's much better to sell than fashion products cross-border. So it's also an interesting case for Alibaba for sure. And last but not least, you also need to think about the big picture. So Alibaba is in some ways competing with Amazon. And we all know that if you buy something on Amazon, sometimes the stuff gets shipped directly from from China. And that's because like most of the Chinese sellers are actually going to Amazon. And Alibaba cannot be happy about this, because for sure they want to offer their Chinese-based vendors an opportunity to sell via the Alibaba platform into foreign markets. So Zalando could also be a great addition to that in this regard. So now the main question would be, will Alibaba dare to do it? Because of course, maybe on paper it makes sense, but will they actually do it? So what speaks for an investment is that Alibaba is a very active investor. They're expanding to Europe also. They are planning to spend around 13 billion euros, and cash is definitely not an issue. What's also quite interesting is that one of the foreign companies that they've bought, one of the few, was Lazada, which is actually also founded by Rocket Internet, same as with Zalando. So there's already kind of a existing link between Zalando and Rocket Internet and Alibaba in some ways. So that's quite an interesting investment story here. Also, as mentioned before, Zalando is currently trading at a discount, so it's cheap compared to what they have been valued at before. So if Alibaba wants to move in, now would be the time. Also, the synergies on the business model side make sense to me, at least. You can disagree on that. And I think it would be a great investor story, both for Zalando shareholders as well as for Alibaba. And on a macro level, you need to see that there's the big players, Alibaba and Amazon. Like, compared to them, Zalando is basically nothing. And it will be between those big giants what's going to happen in the industry. So of course there's always a lot of reasons why this deal maybe would not happen. So one of the reasons is that although Alibaba is an active investor, they have no big history of investing in Europe. In fact, they've never done a deal before. But as I was writing it this week, this already changed. So things are happening so quickly when you talk about China. Just this week, Alibaba announced their first investment. It's actually a Berlin-based company, Data Artisans, which they bought for 90 million. So you can definitely see that Alibaba is already reaching out into the European market. And you may want to question whether Alibaba is still hesitating to actually invest in European markets. Well, another reason might be that Zalando investors may not be in favor of such a deal. Well, you can certainly see it like that, but to be honest, I think that Zalando investors would be more than happy to sell to Alibaba. Another idea would be that, of course, Alibaba, they could build everything on their own. They have founded their office here in Berlin. They have the financial power. They have the know-how. They could do everything without buying anyone. But that would be a different strategy. I think that's not likely. One more reason why Alibaba may not invest into Zalando is that definitely they also have other targets which they could point out and invest in. It doesn't have to be Zalando. For instance, also ASOS, who have similar story to Zalando. They tried to get into the Chinese market, failed big time, and it's also a fashion retailer, but based in the UK, so there's no access to the central market in Europe after Brexit, so that's also unlikely. Well, and of course, Zalando could always just decide to team up with other players such as ASOS. This has been an idea by outlined in the blog Exciting Commerce. I don't think that would be beneficial in a way that it solves the big problem, like where do we get all the growth from? What do we do with China? Chinese companies are coming here anyways. What do I do to get into the Chinese market? Teaming up with Zalando doesn't answer, teaming up with ASOS doesn't answer this question. Now, if we look a little bit more at the timeline here, I don't say that this needs to happen within the next few weeks. I think there's certainly some stages in between. So for instance, this could happen step by step. Well, currently we're at a stage where lots of the thoughts that I'm outlining here are in quite a distant future. So we still have the manual TP onboarding processes and stuff. And AI hasn't fully unfolded yet. So I think there might be some time until we see an acquisition of Zalando, and it could run in different stages. For instance, maybe first the option for the Zalando management team would be to actually go to China, found an innovation lab there, and start investing into Chinese companies or producing local brands and start selling them on the local platforms in a local way. This way they could develop some China-based value-added services in the beginning, get some experience, and this may also be done in a second step or in the first place already as a joint venture with Alibaba. So they could get more in a work mode. If you see the recent acquisition by Alibaba in this Berlin-based startup, Alibaba has been actually one of the clients of this startup, so I'm sure they also want to work with companies where they know already how is the way of working together. And then over time, Alibaba might take more stake into Zalando, for instance, taking some minority shares in the beginning, or later on get like more than 50% of ownership. And then, well, the big picture would be that they get into this partially automatized AI-driven joint cross-border e-commerce platform business model, where I think those two players could, definitely do something together. And we will see that the trends that will speed up between China and Europe in both directions, right? So that's the future I see for those two companies. If they're not building it this way, there might be other ways, of course, but that's the way I see it to unfold. And maybe a little bit about how I see this is that I don't think this is bad news at all. I don't think it's bad that Alibaba expands into Europe. It's actually a very positive thing. It's just the reality that Chinese companies have built huge platforms, huge ecosystems. They have lots of money at hand, and they obviously want to grow their markets. And I think that's good news. And if like companies like Zalando really make the right steps, that could form a very positive future for both sides. You could always think about what if Zalando doesn't get into contact with Alibaba at all, and Alibaba becomes a local competitor. Then this is much more like outlined in the Oliver Wyman report, things getting much more messy and much more competitive. Also some generic key learnings here. These are the bigger trends that I'm seeing that Chinese companies and platforms, which are largely unknown here in Germany, They are big innovators, mostly in fields which are very tech-driven, so artificial intelligence, automatization, robotics, energy storage, biotech, and blockchain. And those companies, they are technology leaders in their fields, and they will keep coming into new markets. They will innovate in China, where they have a closed ecosystem, where they can get huge market shares very quickly, isolated from Western competitors. And in the distant future, I see that many German players will actually become commodities. So for instance, in the automotive market, car manufacturers, of course, China has always been a big market for the car manufacturers. But now that we are seeing trends like electric mobility unfold and all of those big platform economies, which are only based in the US or China, we see that those German companies, they have nothing more to sell than the actual products, because Alibaba and Amazon and Google and Facebook and Tencent, they are the ones who are owning the end consumer. They have the access. Same for the manufacturers in Germany. They have no access to those kind of end consumers, and we see more and more that even those foreign players are becoming access to the European consumer base. So these are the larger trends that I see in general. I think it's one of the major strategic challenges for European and German businesses at the moment. They need to prepare in order to be ready for the future in like 5 years, when all of this will have completely unfolded. If you find those kind of topics interesting, if you're excited about this as I am, also if you want to know more about this and learn more about China, please just send me a direct message here on LinkedIn. I'm actually opening a group on WeChat, so I'm gonna invite some of those stakeholders that I think should work on this together and finding some solutions. So please don't hesitate to directly reach out to me. Looking very forward to connect the community. Also, we're currently outlining our travel plans for 2019. We're going to go to China and visit some of the startup ecosystem players. Going to bring a couple of our clients on board. And if you're interested in joining us or finding out more about China and actually starting to build this bridge between China and Europe, you're more than invited to contact me directly. And a couple of more announcements. Next week, January 15th, I'm going to speak here in Berlin at the conference, the Amazon Sales Congress. My topic will be why your business will also be decided in China. Learn more about China e-commerce, learn more about trends in China, digital China. So meet me here in Berlin, should you be around. And there's one more event that we're already organizing, co-hosted and co-organized by Cleve & Co. and also Baker and McKinsey. It's going to happen here in Berlin. It's, I think, the 14th of February. I link it down below, where Anacode, which is another Berlin-based startup looking towards the Chinese market, and ourselves will present a little bit more about digital China. Okay, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Would be lovely to get your comments down below. Do you think that this merger could turn out into reality? What's your views on Alibaba? Are you excited about it, or are you scared in some way? Leave me some comments. I'm happy to answer them, and also looking forward to the next video, where I'm going to talk about more about the car industry, recent trends in electric mobility, and some of the Chinese startups that you probably not have heard about yet.